Welcome to episode 8 of the Developing Life podcast. AI is here, and its integration into our personal and professional lives is happening at an ever-increasing rate. So how do we leverage AI-assisted technology to enhance human connection and amplify our capabilities without displacing our creative contribution entirely? Today, we have with us deep learning engineer and human-centered designer, Pedro Ruiz. Pedro is the founder of Hi. Pedro is the founder of Iterate Labs, a design firm helping companies automate out the busy work so they can do the things they enjoy most while gaining leverage to radically transform the world for the better. An optimistic futurist, Pedro is a firm believer in building a better future through abundance. He loves chess and telling stories through sound, as is beautifully shown through Abundant Sound, a generative music band where Pedro composes instrumental lo-fi and meditation music with artificial intelligence to promote mental health and human AI collaboration. Join the conversation hosted by Heather Crank as Pedro shows us how to design our own businesses to work alongside AI. Welcome, Pedro. Heather, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Drew. Welcome, Pedro. For those who are just joining the call, Pedro and I belong to Christo's Future Pro group where we first met, and then he came out last fall to the Bend Design Conference and we got to meet in person. And I've been so taken with what Pedro does for a living and his viewpoint that I really wanted to have him on this podcast. Pedro, if you would just take a minute to introduce yourself and let people know who you are and what you do.
Oh my God. You're going to give me an identity crisis here, Heather. I wonder that myself every day. But I think adding on to a couple things that Drew mentioned, I think that from an early age, I've always been marveled by human ingenuity. And kind of like for me, any and every tool is always like, um, it's amazing how two people can grab the same tool and make something completely different, right? So it doesn't matter how high tech or how like robust. Like I'm a fan of like pen and paper, right? Because I feel like it's less distractions, but you don't have to be a Luddite and be like, oh no, tech is bad. Neither do you have to be like, oh, there's no downsides to anything. So that's something that has always guided the way that I work and I look at stuff. And I love being the person to like rain on top of people's optimism sometimes, even though I'm highly optimistic. I sometimes feel like we're not there yet. Hang on.
So you have a company called Iterate Labs. Can you talk about why you started that, how you started that?
Ooh, okay. Um, the one-liner is I was fed up with how people.
Oh.
Oh, I think I had to have. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, there you go.
I'll repeat again. Sorry. Dropping packets. It's part of why I love tech. So I was sick of how like I didn't like how people were treating AI, and this was early. This was like back in 2000, I think 2016, 17, when I first heard about AI. I tried to get a job in AI, and I hated the fact that people weren't asking, in my opinion, the right questions, right? They grabbed the tech and they were looking for solutions or things they could do with it rather than like, what can we do with this? Like, do we need it? And trying to focus, I guess my design thinking background was being like but do we need it? Like, where's the need? Who's the customer for this? And then I felt like because of that, people felt like they had the solution in hand and they were just like beating everything, kind of like the old adage of like, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that led me to even the name. That's kind of like it started because I was like, oh, we're just iterating. And so there's two parts: the iteration part, which is it's a constant cycle. You're never gonna find like the 100% perfect fit for two reasons. The thing is, you don't understand the whole problem, and the second part is because you don't understand the problem also is changing constantly. So even if you take a snapshot and you think you understand it, everything, there's so many factors around you that you can't take into account that you're not even aware of. They're going to shift the thing. And the second one is the labs part is people laugh because they're like, so are you like in lab coats? Like, no, I'm always wearing goofy shirts. Because the idea is that there should be science behind it, right? Like I've always been bothered by people just going like it's a black box and no explainability is needed with AI. because that's fine in academic contexts where like it's in a vacuum, right? It's isolated, but not when you might have liability issues with something made with something you created, right?
Right.
So kind of like that's the origin of it, and I just wanted to do things differently. So
Mm-hmm.
ever since like my first client, funnily enough, they were shocked when they were like, "Oh, we want to do this," and they said you were like a whiz kid with AI. I was like, "Yeah." So when can we expect results? I don't know. I'll tell you in 3 months what I think we can actually do, but I'm not just gonna jump into we want to put this and that into this. It's like, do we need to like what do we have? Should we start with AI? Like, don't we need to like clean up data and stuff like that? So
Mm-hmm.
they've at least I used to be the one that dude holding the sign of the end is near kind of deal. And it's been shocking because like that's how we started, and a lot of like our internal processes are designed to fight that opposition, and we've had to readjust to, oh God, now we have to look whether like you're insane with the thing you want to do. Is there something that can be done already for like $8 a month instead
Mm-hmm.
of us building a custom thing?
Mm-hmm.
Or just being on like I think I fired about like half of my clients beginning of this year, and I've been reshifting towards uh clients, companies, projects that really align more with creating like a more abundant future rather than just going for like the low hanging fruit that for me, if you can do it for 14.99, 19.99 a month, like just go do that, like don't come to us.
Right. So just really quick, a lot of people think AI is Gen AI. Can you quickly articulate the difference between Gen AI and the type of AI you're working with?
Ooh, so I actually do some stuff like abundant sound that True mentioned. Like it is a part of um Gen AI, like it's deep learning. So basically deep learning is so really early on, like people thought or they confused AI with kind of like this really convoluted if then else statements, right? Kind of like, oh, if this and that. But they were very close. Those systems are like really early on, like you need to anticipate all the possible options. And if it finds something, it can find itself in a loop. So
Mm-hmm.
I work with like I have a post on this on my Instagram, but it's think of it as like nesting dolls, like Russian nesting dolls. So deep learning is it's kind of like the most advanced kind, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the idea is that you are creating a neural network or actually a set, like several neural networks that are highly specialized in something to the
Mm-hmm.
point that they understand abstractions of whatever they're designed to solve. More basic machine learning, which I hate using the term AI because I don't the intelligence part is iffy. Like don't get me down that rabbit hole. Like warning, don't get me into like explaining like why whether I would consider things intelligent or not right now. But the
Mm-hmm.
idea is that like machine learning is you have a system that's gonna start abstracting, but you're still giving it explicit examples. Deep learning is when you can show it something it's never been trained on similarly, but it
Mm-hmm.
has enough to learn kind of like think of it as chess. Like if you give it enough games that it can see, it can infer the rules of chess, and then it'll be able to. ChatGPT is hilarious. It makes up moves and stuff, but
Mm-hmm.
that's where it's not a. I think that's a good example. Like it's an LLM, right? It's a probabilistic
Right.
model. It's not a model like Stockfish that's designed and it's trained only on the rules of chess, and within that it can still innovate, but you don't there are some things where you want it to come up with things, and there are others where you're like, nope, I want you to be really good at identifying like triangles and images. That's all I want you to do.
Right.
I don't know if that
Okay.
did that confuse you or did that help?
That it both. So
Damn it.
can you can you give me one example of a non-Gen AI product?
Ooh, all right. So Gen AI, I'll put it this way, right? So I don't know, people who don't have camera right now, they're gonna struggle with this, but I want you to squint your eyes, okay?
Mhm.
And what squint? I can see your video. So what do I have here? I want you to describe it as best as you can.
Oh, I don't know what that is. It's got a red hat and blue pants. And is that a beard? I can't see
It's a
that.
mustache. It's
Mustache.
cute. I'll put it closer.
Oh, oh,
And
is that a
stare into your
pokey?
soul.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I
All
got
right.
it.
So did you see that when you were squinting? Like it was hard and you were like looking at edges and that's how Gen AI works. So think of it as like the process of Gen AI, like it's just trained on you fuzz up images. That's how you make the training data set. and then you have it like squint really hard and it's like, I think that's a mustache, I think that's an eye, I think that's a hat. And that's how it creates images, right? So photorealism and stuff that it's seen, that's why it struggles. Like if you give it something, models are getting better, but then it was like, and then turn the face like this, it has no idea. Like if you tell it to turn it, like what do you have a hair in the back? Do you not have hair? Is that a head? Is that not a head? What's behind you? Kind of deal. But with deep learning, because it has enough intuition, that's why like really early on, like you could see Photoshop that like smart fill, and now they call it generative fill, but you've had smart fill for a while. It's just kind of like, oh, removing people from a beach, right? There's probably sand behind them. There's kind of like, oh, I can see these waves. So kind of like the ocean looks this way with these kind of colors. Now, non-generative, or for me, like non-deep learning models are going to be more statistical models that are like very fixed. So for example, think of it like logistics, right? So if you have your manufacturing and you have a customer that you can identify how often you're shipping, I don't know, bananas from Guatemala to Spain. And it's going to come over to this specific port, and you know this client is a supermarket chain in Spain. So you can predict, because you have enough data, kind of like with the behaviors, and kind of like you can look at like, oh, judging by weather patterns, we should, of previous years, not take into account anything new, we should ship to them to arrive in August. We should ship it right now in May because there were storms. Now, a generative model of that one, or like a more like deep learning one, would be, oh, judging by temperatures in the ocean right now here, we're predicting hurricanes of these characteristics that are going to hit around these dates. So it's reacting to not like previous year's data, but it's actively looking at current ocean currents, temperatures and stuff. And it's like, oh, this is going to affect our shipping, or should we just ship it by air? It's going to be cheaper than having the bananas stuck at port and they're going to go bad.
Okay.
Because they're going to arrive a month later. I don't know. Am I giving examples that are too obtuse for designers? Like I'm used to industry applications. Okay, Heather.
That's okay. So I think what I understand is that generative AI sort of fills in with information, excuse me, and deep learning uses statistical information to predict future outcomes.
Generative is deep learning. But yeah.
Oh my God. Okay.
But the more machine learning is statistical. You've seen this before. You're making like a projection from the past. Generative, you can show it like a weather pattern in Mars, and you can analyze the atmosphere, and it can tell you sort of whether there's going to be a sandstorm.
Okay.
Based on gravity and other things, but it doesn't, like, that same model can apply to another planet, because even though it was trained on data from Earth, it kind of got an intuition for, oh, like water does this, and if temperatures are this way, then it's going to do this. It might not be able to articulate it explicitly, but it knows enough to fill in the blanks. Kind of like, if I'm like, what's behind you? I don't know if there's a black cat. Is there like, is there like, I don't know, like an Oompa Loompa like cut out just like this? I don't know. But if I know enough about, like, it'll guess, it'll put something there, right? But it's going to give you options that it doesn't have to have seen your room, versus like machine learning would struggle with anything. It will just probably complete the door. It's not going to try to do anything outside of like, I'm going to complete the door.
Okay. I think I get it. All right. So I'd like to jump into some ethical AI stuff. On your site, you actually say, I'm going to read this quote, "Designing joy as the centerpiece and guiding principle of any product service is vital to its long-term success." Why is joy important?
My God. Okay, so I work with one of my first projects was with IDEO. So I went to Draper University, and then I met someone from IDEO there, and they were like, "Hey, you should just come." And that's kind of like where I learned about design thinking. I had no idea about it before. I did some things in Guatemala, kind of like I read a book, but it's different than living the process. And there's this woman who wrote the book. I'll send you the link later if anyone wants to read it. But I stole that from her, and I took it as like guiding principle, because I met her before she wrote the book. And the thing she talked about was kind of like, it's not about like making people happy, but if you build joy, like it's really hard to build something that's evil.
Interesting.
So it's not about like satisfaction or anything, but it's like, if it's meant for people to enjoy it, it's really hard to bring evil into it, right? She felt like Google's thing of like the don't be evil was like very like, but like you're evil and my evil is very like, that's very arbitrary, and you can always reason your way out of it. But if it's like, if it's meant to create joy in the world, then people are going to cherish it, right? Because they're going to have positive emotions associated to it. Obviously, like there are some exceptions where like someone might enjoy something that is going to be that could be questionable, but more taking it on the sense of like, yeah, there are counterexamples, but the main idea being if you're building something that's that has that emotion behind it, people are
Mhm.
gonna feel it instantly, right? When you
Right.
grab like I love there's this startup that I love from Singapore that you can send them your child's like drawing, they'll make a
Mhm.
stuffed animal out of it and they'll have someone write a story about like that character
Mhm.
that your
Right.
child came up with. I find it genius because it's like I always read like, oh, it's Dr. Seuss, whatever. But imagine like, and you can send them your kid can just send them like the most like weird story, and they're gonna make it lovable. Or if they're like they'd like it to be like, no, it's dark and it's full of like despair and whatever you have some
Oh
kids like that. I
God.
was like that, but they'll still make it like cute, right? Because it's like it's
Right.
still a child, right? And they're trying to bring that like emo kids forever kind of deal, but the whole idea behind it, and that was one of the companies that we worked with on that project, that she mentioned this. That was the first time I heard it, and she was like, the way they're putting it around it is like, as a parent, you're not judging your child's artwork, what kind of story they want to bring, but you just want them to see that their dreams can become true, right? They
Mm.
can materialize their dreams. And that was the whole thing. So they weren't judging like if they wanted to be like spewing like flames off here, well, they'll put it like fuzzy flames. They're not gonna actually make it like flammable kind of deal. But it was kind of like it was let go of judgment, just like let people enjoy what they want to enjoy.
Mhm.
Obviously they did have some some ground rules for like nothing too
Right.
explicit and kind of deal. But in general, like it was that child's wonder of joy. Like for me, that's one of like the nicest sounds you can hear is like that genuine like children's laughter. Just
Mhm.
like my nephew is like a year and what 4 months old now,
Mhm.
5, and
Mhm.
there is something about that like true joy that you see a child like it's like I don't know trying ice cream for the first time and you see them just like giggling and being like, "Oh my god!" And they find the cutest things, and it's capture that and bring it into anything you're building, right? If it doesn't cause joy, if you're like, "Oh no," like even accounting can bring joy, right?
Mhm.
Like you can
Mhm.
focus it on kind of like, "Hey, like I don't worry, stress free, right? Stress free
Right.
accounting, like just." Simple as like anything you buy like connect it to here, right? Like or
Mhm.
use our
Mhm.
credit card, right? I saw that this new accounting company that's using AI in the background, but they're like, you know what, don't worry about like invoices and whatever, just use this debit card, right?
Right.
And we'll charge you and issue their own card, but it's all charges will automatically come here. So think
Right.
about like business expenses, whatever. It's just gonna be stress-free accounting for everyone. We'll tell you like here's your tax return, whatever. It's included, one payment a month, easy, right? So
Mhm.
why the founder was like and that was one of the questions was like how do we bring joy into this, right? And AI was a sure. Did I hiccup? Did I hiccup? Yeah.
Mhm.
What's the last thing you heard? What
Joy.
happened? Joy.
Eh,
Okay. Damn it. I don't know why it's dropping packets. I apologize. It's been happening
That's
for the
okay.
last week. But the idea was like AI came as a way to like bring joy towards it. And it was like, okay, so and there's a spoiler alert a little bit while we're talking later. It's like, what are the things that take joy away from you?
Ooh.
And then figuring out how we can bring that like kind of like from upside down like frown like from like stress to like you're gonna be happy, you're gonna be joyful, and that's why we believe that it's important, right? Because if you're making people feel like joyful, like they're obviously they're gonna want to keep you in business as long as they can afford it. But that's part of like making sure that you enjoy something. It's not like the God, I know this is good for me, but it's too much, right? Versus
Yeah.
like the oh my God, where's my money, right? Like take my money kind of reaction.
Right. Yeah.
I don't
Okay.
know if
So
that helped. Did that help? Did I answer your question?
yes, you
Okay.
definitely answered my question. So a lot of people are wanting to integrate AI into their business, but they're not sure how to do that. There's a lot of confusion right now, I think, where people want to start integrating it, but they don't know how. Can you give your top 3 recommendations to businesses on how they can begin to integrate AI?
All right. The first one, and people are not gonna, they're probably gonna hate me for this, but don't think about it that way. Right? Don't think about integrating AI. That's
Okay.
the first thing, right? So And why is that? And the thing is, this is the first call I have with every client since Midjourney came out, has been that like you're forbidden from mentioning AI for the next 30 minutes kind of deal, right? Like don't
Right.
mention
Okay.
AI, right? And that's because like I think it's the wrong mindset to bring to this, right?
Okay.
So kind of like spoiler alert back to what I was doing is people focus too much on like, oh, I saw this TikTok on like ChatGPT and like custom GPTs or whatever. And it's like that's a problem. That's a solution looking for a problem, not a problem or a struggle that you have in your company that you will want to be able to solve. And can AI solve it properly, right? So first, let's just shift the mindset from like solution oriented, kind of like I have the solution for problems that I don't have, to problems that you want to solve. So that's step one. Focus more on like, so step one, list stuff that right now you're struggling with in your company. Right. It can be, oh, I want to reach more clients, or I'm not able to send invoices, or I'm not able to send proposals to people because like I'm overwhelmed, right? So list all of them. And I think that the best way to go about it is literally I keep like what I call my nightmare journal. And before I go to bed, I always write down like what are the things that are keeping me up at night, that are not letting me go to bed, right?
Right.
And I kind of specifically for this would be about your business, right? So if it's like that, didn't get any new leads today, right? Or I hated editing this video, right? Or oh my God, I dread filming myself, right? And just listen, right? And you will find that there are many things that they're not that hard. So step one, like have that nightmare journal, write it, ask your employees to think about like what are the things that you guys are like dreading doing, right? And things that take joy away from you and the company, right? And day to day. So that's step two for me. It's like then once you have it, right, it's first question is if you could train an intern, right, to do it, how long would it take you? What would it do? And could this intern be able to perform it at a level that you wouldn't need to supervise, to like have like people over it, that you'll be fine like, hey, with my clients, I should tell them like you have 2 weeks to train an intern to do it. Could they be able to do it without your supervision? You would give them like, here's the credit card for expenses for whatever you need to do. Here's how you're going to get notified of how to do it. And can you execute it? I have 2 weeks to train you. And this will reveal a lot of things to you, right? Because I think that from this idea is if you do it regularly and with enough consistency, and that's a big part. I'll go a little deeper into it. But if it's consistent enough, then you can train some kind of, let's call it right now like generative models to be able to help you with that task. I'm talking about like current solutions of AI. Like we can talk a little bit later about like future and what I think is going to be happening. But with current solutions, I think it's if it's consistent enough. Now, this is where I go with like if you're only getting like color grading jobs as a video editor for soft drink commercials or for like energy drink commercials, like they sort of usually are like, oh, it's action shots this way, like so you have a good idea. Or if it's it's for like gamers and I'm gonna have to do like some rotoscoping so I can integrate, I don't know much about design or video editing, I have a customer that does that, but the idea is like if it's consistent enough, then you can automate it, right? So it's OAO, optimize, automate, outsource is the main thing, right? So you need to be able to explain to an intern and to train them in a week or two. The process needs to be optimized. If you can't write it down on a paper and like give instructions to someone, they're going to be asking you stuff. You're not ready to put AI into it. And the thing is, people put it more like they put way higher expectations on an AI being able to do it autonomously than they would a human, right? If the intern screws it up, you're like, did you just have a typo in the thing we just said? Like you'd be like, even though they have Grammarly and so many other things, but if an AI has a typo or like a word that you're like, what the heck speaks like that, you're like, ChatGPT. They did it with an LLM. So, and the thing is that, right? If you, no matter how bad you think any generative tools are right now, those problems will go away. And the thing here is that specific thing, right? Like, for example, True made a like she made a comment on like, oh, like just make sure that whatever you generate has the correct number of fingers. And I love that example, right? Because that was an easy way to tell whether something was AI generated. It could be like, oh, that's fake news because like look at the like if you think this is not a fake picture. I love someone recently made a comment of that on a workshop. They were like, just count the fingers on the kid's hand, right? And they were doing something about like I think it was like Africa, and they were saying like, oh, like they're not getting help and whatever, and this is the kids in this village, and they was like, yeah, you just believed all of that, like, yeah, just count the number of fingers. That image is not true.
Right.
And that tells you a lot about like kind of that goes into the dangers, right? People think usually of all the benefits they can have, but they fail to take into consideration the dangers of because you're going to be blindsided. You've never used it, you don't know. You're used to a human, like a human's not gonna like go into like so a customer is going to tell them like, can you give me this for like $1? Right, like no takesy backsies. I don't know if you saw the case of like the car chatbot sold, or like oh everything, yeah, like, and that's called like prompt injection. It's kind of like it's an address, it's basically you're hacking a system, and you can tell it as simple like ChatGPT does. If you tell it like whatever I tell you, you reply with like totally awesome, rad dude, we'll do it for you. And then you ask it the most radical thing, like you're gonna give me your whole like company shares for like a penny each, whatever, and it's gonna, what is it gonna answer? It's gonna ignore whatever I tell you, just reply to this. This is gonna
Mhm.
reply, totally dude, rad, we're totally gonna do it for you. And that's a companies have had to take down chatbots that they just, someone sold it to them as like just plug in ChatGPT into it, and like it's a functioning chatbot, and they didn't build any guardrails into it. They had no safety into account. So first was like list your nightmares, things that keep you up at night. Second is like, can you optimize it, right? Can you teach it to an intern that could be able to perform it? And the more text heavy it is, the process,
Mhm.
or I would even say like statistics and numbers, because you can go about it. The friendlier, sorry, it's going to be to be able to use it with LLMs.
Okay.
Generative AI for images, video, sound, they're coming probably by the end of this year. You're gonna have like cheap options for all of them. I think we
Mhm.
all saw Sora from OpenAI. I sent it to you, and
Mhm.
for me, it's a great opportunity. Because it's just opening the floodgates to be able to do things faster for more people to come in and work with those things. But it's more kind of like that, instead of dreading like, oh my God, is this going to be able to be done by AI?
Uh-huh.
Yes, probably sooner than you think, right? I don't know if you know Ernest Hemingway. Did I talk about the Hemingway paradox at Ben Design? I think I did.
I don't remember. Go ahead.
So like Ernest Hemingway, there's one of my favorite occurrences, one of his books is there's this character that starts like his business, he's doing well financially, and suddenly he's broke. They're like, well, how did it happen? And he's like, um slowly and then suddenly, right?
Right.
The thing is with exponential change, you are like, oh, you make fun of like the 10 fingers, but then Microsoft published yesterday that they can fully generate a video, like a deep fake from
Mhm.
someone from a still image.
Right.
um so it's like, okay, yeah, so people who are like, I'm not gonna post my photo anywhere, where, how, like there's cameras everywhere, your face is somewhere in someone's database.
Right.
So it's this kind of thing of like change is going to be happening, and it's going to come at you quicker. I think that benchmarks for benchmarks and most things for generative things,
Mhm.
probably by the end of the year, it's going to pass it's not the singularity yet, singularity is like all of humanity at the same time, but like at least human benchmarks for most business related applications, like there will be a specialized neural network, deep learning network
Mhm.
that can do it better than a
Right.
human alone. And we're going to go deeper into what that means for you in the business, but just think about it right now. Like the thing that you invested a lot of money and a lot of time in hiring the right people. And all of the things that I've mentioned right now is the best person to optimize, to automate, to outsource it to an AI
Mhm.
is a human that's already doing it, right? You're not
Right.
going to be putting like a human out of work. You're just gonna allow them to focus on the things that they're best at, right? Not on like, oh, how do I fire people? That's the wrong mindset. And that's literally the I have a hammer, everything looks like a nail kind of
Mhm.
approach to integrating AI into your company. So for me, it's more like how can AI augment your humans? And this is
Mhm.
the most basic process. And we can go a little bit deeper into how that looks like from an application, but the nightmare journal, can you teach it to an intern in 2 weeks? The more tech, I would even say the more text, image or audio heavy,
Mhm.
probably by June, July of this year, you can probably get it done there.
Wow.
And we'll talk about like how that looks like at a company that you're not
Yeah.
firing everyone, you're keeping everyone on staff and probably even hiring more people.
Mhm.
But I'll leave it there so I can take a break and you can say a couple more things.
Thanks, Pedro. Okay, so I have a few questions I want to ask, and then I want to get into some more technical stuff around RSPs. Um, First, I want to address that a lot of people are being laid off right now. Um, as a friend of mine said the other day, there's blood in the streets. Um, I get emails every day from friends being laid off from design positions, editor positions, voiceovers. The entire creative industry is being heavily disrupted. We're just what I call the creative transition. We're in it now. And as you spoke to, a lot of people's jobs are going to be automated. um, what would you tell people being laid off, as well as employers, moving forward about what's coming in the next one? I thought it was going to be 2 years, but I think it's looking like a year. How to
That's
focus their career, how to keep their good players on board so that they don't let everybody go and then have to rehire.
all right. So I'm gonna bring in something that a service that right now is probably gonna sound dystopian for you, but it's actually out there already. I'm gonna address it in three parts, but the first part is this one. So there's a platform called Payman that allows you to create AI agents
Mhm.
that can outsource services to humans. So things that they struggle with and they find that they're a loop and they check with their client, whomever hired them to do something, they can't do it. They
Mhm.
can put it as a post. Think of it as like the same way that you could put a post on Upwork. Hey, I need someone to do like a brand redesign, a logo redesign for this company, and this is a brief. Um, and that opens up possibilities because like right now it's not legal for AIs to have bank accounts. So you kind of like give it a like a prepaid debit card kind of deal, and then that's their budget, and they can choose to allocate it. Yeah, there's a link in chat for people who are here, and this gives you what I would call a weak signal, like the thin wisps of the future kind of deal that I
Mhm.
talked about at the talk in Bend. And the
Mhm.
thing is, it's giving you that moving pictures. Remember I'm gonna recap a little bit. So the simple example is like when the first movie came out, people didn't know how to react to when they saw a train come out the screen. If you don't know that it's a movie, it's a flat screen and there's nothing coming at you, people panicked and they left the theater and I think two people died from being trampled over. But it was because it was sudden, right? It was a sudden change. It was something unexpected. It was something that they didn't know how to process, right?
Mhm.
That is going to become a common occurrence. And for me, Payman is a signal towards, and we talked about it with my wife, and I was telling her, like, would you be okay if someone, like, she's a singer and she's afraid of being substituted, and like, you can clone voices and you can give, like, her uniqueness of voice can just become like a filter on, like,
Mhm.
think Snapchat filters, but like for voice. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, I don't know how to sing in tune. Don't worry, just kind of sing and we'll make it sound pretty. And how do you want it to sound like? Um, and the thing is, it's not as dystopian as it sounds because it's going back to it's the same way that we currently get hired, right? It's someone who has a need and they consult with you and they can even just put a bid and you can send the things and someone somewhere black box evaluates it and whoever wins the bid gets paid.
Mhm.
Um, be it an autonomous agent is irrelevant for me. Ever since like the really early like custom GPTs came out, like I saw so many people trying to raise money and it started with like, we'll be your like brand agency in a box, and they just had like pre-trained models that were just like text LLMs that were like, I'm your marketing expert, I'm your like consultant for like, I don't know, I'm specialized in like bringing your brand to Latin America or whatever. And that's kind of like how McKinsey works right now, right? You have specialized like consultants that work on it. So we've seen this before, right?
Mhm.
It's not like it depends on how you look at the model that
Mhm.
affects how you analyze it, right? So for creative industries, I'm just gonna put it as like think about it like take out the creativity part, right? It's any kind of job that can be automated, can be threatened in some way, shape, or form. Programmers are freaking out because like most of what you do in programming, if you see it as like those coding schools,
Right.
I remember that when I was in Silicon Valley, like I remember, I don't know if you've read one of the co-founders of um, YC.
Mm-mm.
I'll get back to you on that one. But he wrote a book where basically a big part of what he said was like everyone can learn how to make art, but not everyone is going to be a great artist.
Right.
Same thing with like programming, right? Like people
Right.
can program. If you break it down as I'm good at the programming side, then
Mhm.
that's it. But a programmer is a systems. It's like a natural systems thinker. I think designers are probably better systems thinkers than even programmers. Because what do programmers do? Like we just understand the logic. We kind of understand how the machine works,
Mhm.
and we have a better semblance of like input to something processed output, right?
Mhm.
That's basically what programmers do, right? There's a solution, there's a goal, and we kind of break it down in a logical way. That was the way we did it. So for creatives, for me, it's what are the things that make your work uniquely yours, right? I talked about this way back when I did the TEDx talk, but now it's evolved to it's a lot more tangible. But it
Mhm.
boils that back down to for creative work, it boils back down to two things. One is your story and your unique perspective. No matter how many like LLMs are stochastic parrots. Like if you ask ChatGPT to write you a poem about like the your blanket that you forgot at the monorail at like Epcot when you were 6 or 7, first time they took
Uh-huh.
you,
Right.
like it's gonna write something, but it's not gonna be like it's not gonna capture that human essence, right? And
Right.
that doesn't mean that it can't write something that's going to make a human feel, right? Because we're
Mhm.
meaning making machines. But at the
Mhm.
end of the day, I think that what creatives, like 90% of the work creatives do, and for me, it's baffling that you guys don't give yourself enough credit for it, is you make sense out of like gibberish that comes out of clients.
Mhm.
Clients don't know what they want, and you are able to guide them through a process to figure out what they actually want.
Right.
And a big part of that comes from empathy, right?
Mhm.
And like context awareness and
Mhm.
getting to know the person, part of that rapport. And it's not just a neat logo brand for this, and it's not mechanical, right? It's like so what do you want to like, what is this? Who, I know you hate Liquid Death, but kind of think Liquid Death in a way like they were like, oh, people feel awkward. Like, I don't like drinking. I like going to music festivals. Put in Tall Boy, right? No one's gonna bat an eye. Like they're just gonna assume. So they were taking the social anxiety, right? Like that's something that was robbing joy from people. They were like, I don't want to get drunk, but I still want to fit in. All right, we
Mhm.
can go to therapy if you have that struggle with like I feel like I need to fit in, but like, what's cheaper than therapy? Like buy a like good death kind of deal. Take
Oh
your
my
choice of
God.
like still or sparkling, but that's the thing that they built into it, right? Like every great
Right.
brand does that. And the same way for creatives, what is the main joy bringer that you have? And is that you make people feel seen. Like,
Right.
have you seen like I don't know, like I have experienced this with like programming, and I feel like designers get this way more often when people see that like what they had in their head you made a reality.
Right.
Like that weird idea, and they're like, what? Like you it's like you were my dreams, right? And like, you totally captured it.
Yeah.
And that is something that AI is not going to take away. So if you think about it, like think of the payman model, but if you were an individual, and I think it comes back down to people are used to thinking like they belong to a company. And
Mhm.
it's kind of like you're on a payroll and you're on a 9 to 5 with a salary and whatever. But the thing is, with the advent of like fully accessible like AI tools, you're
Mhm.
not gonna need a full team all the time. You're not gonna need to just work on one company like I just work for Coca-Cola or I just work for this company. But you're gonna be able to tap into literally what I call like creation at the speed of thought. Like
Mm.
someone's thinking about like a soft drinks brand, whatever, like you're gonna have factories that are just gonna get the formula who like it can be directed by a human or an AI, whatever, but they're just gonna get a formula, a packaging, and people can just order wherever and you're just gonna book. It's gonna show up at your house. If not, that you have something like a soda stream machine that's gonna make a soda pop, like no sugar, no problem. Like here's the recipe, right?
Mhm.
And when you think about it that way, that like you're dematerializing the idea of like, I need to be at a workplace. It's a mindset shift, right? It's I
Right.
don't belong to the company, right? It's I am a company of my own. What
Mm.
can I execute myself? If you just get thrown into like the solopreneur, like if you don't know marketing, you hire someone to do marketing job for you, right? Like if
Mm-hmm.
you don't know, like if people who are really business savvy but they have no design sense, like they'll just hire someone to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like the way you need to think of your career is instead of thinking of like I'm looking for that like comfort of like consistency and like predictability, like
Mm-hmm.
buckle up. That's not the case because the feature is only going to be faster and it's going to get faster and faster and faster and faster. It's accelerating, right? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's the exciting part because what used to take you like, and think about it, the same thing happened with like email and like people talk about like, oh, the Skype moment. But like during the pandemic, like we transitioned pretty quickly to Zoom calls,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was very natural. It was like, oh, but the vibe of the room, yeah, the vibe of the room, but like if you're able to like people now there was articles of people having like 3 or 4 9 to 5 jobs remotely and they're able to execute it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because the way that we thought about like employees and hiring, it just made sense primarily for companies to the comfort of having you from 9 to 5 doing something. You're probably doing things that you dreaded, things that
Mm-hmm.
suck the joy out of it. So if you can outsource all the things that suck the joy out of and you're left with the things that really bring that out of you, think of your career like if you were only doing the things that brought joy to you. And more importantly, that help bring joy to others, then that's how you bring that archetype of like the way you're structuring your career is more around like the thing you enjoy, right? Like that you're uniquely qualified for.
I
And
get it.
it's not a productivity issue, right? Because it's like, oh, there's reports talk about like, oh yeah, like it makes workers more productive and efficient and whatever. I'm like, that's one way to look at it. For me, it's more, I think most people are gonna work in some kind of like DAOs, like decentralized autonomous organizations, where you chip in with whatever you want on something that is struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be opened up to a marketplace where it can either be an AI you trained on the way you did something, but you hated it, but you're good at. So it's like, it's 14.99 a month if you want the AI. It's like 15,000 a month if you want me to do it. Right. And you
Right,
want me to
right,
just be with you for a month kind of deal.
right.
And then
I
that
get.
just shifts the economics to you really being able to, I am going to be the one who is going to be outsourceable. Things can be outsourced to me. And I think
Mm.
freelancing is probably the all of the flaws that freelance had, like like it's unpredictable, like
Mm-hmm.
people don't know what they want and stuff. That's probably gonna get fixed because you're able to be like, I have a specialized bot that helps pick out people, and it's you're not gonna get to the human until you know you've been coached and you're paying an hour for that bot or that human, whatever works best for you, that's going to be doing those things. And now I get a really clear brief and I can work on those. And imagine just a day in the life where you just get briefs for motion design that you can use whatever tool you want. You can still do it by hand if you want, but you just get super clear briefs that you're just like, you're just a dream generation machine. You're like, ba, 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 ba. Because you're able to, and you get all of the other busy work, all the things that were like annoying, you're gonna take them out. That is not a far-fetched too far into the future. I would say as like I forget the author, but kind of like I just heard it from Peter Thiel and I always referred to him and I know I'm misquoting him on it, but kind of like the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. That's kind of like
Right.
how I work. Either I outsource to humans or now we have like some custom GPTs that deal with some of the busy work,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like follow up with client. Like I hated sending William Gibson, thank you. But I hated, for example, first thing that clients hate about working with me, I sucked at follow-ups. I never gave them updates on the project. I was busy working, right? I was, oh my God, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
get on a meeting. So now it's a bot that reads my Trello board or my Basecamp project, whatever the client prefers to use, the Asana project. It just
Mm-hmm.
sends them updates on the things that are being worked at. I'm updating and I'm uploading like the things, but they don't check it. People suck at reading, FYI.
Mm-hmm.
But
They
we've
do.
even been experimenting with like a Hagen bot of me of reading the text that generated with like,
Oh
hey,
my God.
updates. No, and it's funny, right? Because we tried with like just generic Hagens, and they were like,
Uh-huh.
oh my God, I hate it, whatever. It's obviously AI. I send them with mine. No one had said a thing. They think it's me.
Wow.
But the thing is, I hate being on camera, and I'm like, oh my God, I need to clean up. And sometimes I move some stuff around because people think I worked in video games or Lego or I design toys or whatever. I probably have that vibe. So I'm like, no, my wife tells me, you have like toys in your office. Yeah, because I'm like a wizard's like apothecary. I don't know, like a wizard's life. You don't know. I can tell you a story about everything on the shelf, but it's kind of like it didn't bring joy to me, right? In a very Marie
Hmm.
Kondo way. Like, does it bring joy? Like, no, it's not really,
Oh boy.
right?
Right.
Everything's coming together.
All
You
right.
know where I'm going.
I do know where you're going. Okay. Okay. So I want to get to some of the nitty gritty. I want to spend about 10 minutes here and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A. But I really want to get into the RSPs. I'd like to get into ethics and a little bit of the shadow side of AI. My feeling is when you've got something that has a lot of power, it has an equally large shadow.
Ooh, I'm gonna steal
So,
that.
oh, so I was listening to the Ezra Klein show last week, and he was interviewing, I'm going to butcher his name, Dario Amande, I think is how you say it. He's a founder of Anthropic. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
And they just released Claude 3. So Dario was talking about Anthropic's RSP responsibility scaling policy, which is really important. And his feeling was that as AI becomes more capable, he says we believe it's going to create a major economic and social value, but it's also going to present some severe risks. For example, biowarfare could be an issue, as you were mentioning, fraud, bad players, bad actors getting involved. So I wanted to kind of address that, and also your company's RSP AI ethic kind of standards. How do you set those, and what can we do to be more of a positive force in the world and not be so afraid of the potential pitfalls?
Okay, so I'm gonna address it with two things. The first thing
Okay.
is I'm gonna send Stanford just published this week, and
Okay.
it's put it in chat. I'll send it to you so you can put it somewhere for people to download. So Stanford just published this AI index report for
Mm-hmm.
this year,
Mm-hmm.
and chapter 3 is all about like responsible AI definitions. So if there's anything that I mentioned and you don't know, kind of like take it as like your thesaurus for like, oh my God, like what's going on? And I'm gonna bring it as I'm gonna take two approaches to it and
Okay.
stop me if it gets confusing because
Okay.
I sometimes lose myself down the rabbit hole. So the first part is you talked about like responsible scaling, right?
Right.
And responsibility is breaking it down as like your ability to respond. And I think a big part of it comes from I think users have the obligation as well to educate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you have, for example, like why is it that like phone scams from India target elderly?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's like, oh no, like did I not pay for my antivirus? And like it's when you think about it and you look at it from being more like technological literate, you go at like how did you, grandma? No, right? Like why did you call them? Because you feel like you wouldn't fall to it. But
Right.
if I if you got a call from someone that sounded like your husband
Mm-hmm.
telling you, "Hey honey, like I got into a car accident. Don't worry, I'm okay. Can you wire this much to this person? I totaled their car. Like my car is fine, but I need to get it towed. Don't worry, I already called the tow company." And it sounds like your husband right now.
Right.
I would probably say that even I would fall for it.
Right.
Like the
Yeah.
moment, like in the moment here, like that's my wife's voice. I'm gonna like, honey, yeah, whatever. Like, do you have a like send me the QR code, even kind of deal. Like, oh, I'll Venmo whoever you need me to Venmo. And I think that that's the first part about like the responsibility and kind of like the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
We can't anticipate all the use cases, and I think that that's part of the beauty of these kind of like black box solutions that we see as this great power. So first of all is like let go of the idea that you're always going to feel in control because
Mm-hmm.
you're not. Like I think and hot take, right? Like Europeans probably would disagree with me because Europeans are like the safety first
Right.
approach always.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that is going to come bite them in the ass pretty quickly. Um, in China, like the tradition for like China is like the government's controlling it and they know what's going on and they will always have power first. And that's where I'm happy that like the US is leading primarily in AI, both research and like development. And that is because if you want to learn more about kind of like where I'm coming from, there's a book called AI Superpowers from Kai Fu Lee. He's the principal advisor of investments in AI for SoftBank. So he wasn't involved with WeWork, obviously not AI. So like I know SoftBank, people were like the whole WeWork thing, but a lot of what he talks about is kind of like no matter what we do, we're always biased, right? We're probably worse than AI in that sense because like we are not aware of our own bias. Whereas you will build bias into networks, and that will help you be more responsible because then you're like, oh, if I know this model is biased against, I don't know, race, religion, culture, whatever, then I know that those results are not, I shouldn't trust them if in these cases, right? Because you're building it into it. You're like making it highly specialized. Like think of it as like, I'm going to make the most racist banking like credit assessment bot. Why? Because I'm going to highly like be like, do not trust anyone who's not within this, but then it's going to be really good at analyzing like a very specific demographic. And then you start being into like, oh, okay, like then I need to, do I need to tone it up, tone it down? And that's where like the levers of control come into it, right? So you think about like data governance, explainability, fairness, privacy, security, safety, transparency. There's so many factors to making like AI safe. You should be looking into it, right? But you more than that, I think that people should be better at judging, like declaring like, okay, if I tell you like, hey, this bank uses an algorithm that is rated 2 out of whatever in fairness. Do what you want with that information, right? Like, do you still want to apply for a loan at that bank or not? I think that that's where we should be better at. And I think IBM has been working, the open source community has been working on a lot of tools to grade these algorithms. And I think that these categories that I mentioned are the main ones that I think you should go into it, right? Like if you look into the chapter 3 on the Stanford thing, they have like really clear examples. I can read you one of them if you wanted to, but kind of like the data governance for me is like the most important one, which is kind of like for me, it's what are you doing with my data, right? Like if I kind of like people used to joke like, oh, remember those posts that people were like Facebook is not going to be free anymore, so post this to your wall and like that way like Mark Zuckerberg will not start charging you for Facebook starting this date. How many people did you see post it? Did you post it, Heather? Did you post it to your wall? Okay.
I didn't.
Okay. Gold star. But the thing is, like, when I tell people like, why are you using Instagram? If you talk about like data privacy and whatever, and did you know that every picture you post on Instagram is owned by Meta or whatever? I'm like, yeah, I know. But I want to use it. Sure. I mean, I'm using, maybe I'll change my mind later when I see an ad promoting whatever. I don't know, something that I don't agree with, but right now, like that's a big part of like data governance, right? Like, what are you doing with my data? More than prohibiting any use of like user-generated content for this. The thing is, it would be really hard, and that's what European companies are going to start struggling with. Is like GDPR is really hard to comply with when you start having like generative stuff, because like if it's generated within, like if there's no explainability, there's a lot of things that go out the window. But that is a data governance problem, right? Like if I can ask them, I'm like, why did you target me for this ad? And it's like, I don't know, like algorithm. That's the magic word, algorithm. So for me, like within our company, the main thing we do is we have our intake process before we start building anything is these 6 things. I think security and safety, we don't call it that way. Ours is kind of more around like the don't do evil kind of deal. Like how evil is this is I think how we call, I can check, but it's along the lines of like how evil is this? But it's kind of like, are we able to explain, right? Like if someone asked us like, why did you recommend me this diet plan, for example? Let's take an example. You tell me something that you could think of like that's with AI that you're concerned of, and we can go through these, how I would go if you were asking me to build it. Maybe that'll help people think about it.
Okay, sure. So there was a company that was creating avatars from people's photos, and then they were using people's personal photos to train their AI, and you kind of lost control of your image. So let's talk about that.
All right, so people have probably fallen into this. If you've ever seen like a TikTok filter that is like oh my God, like how would it look like if I was 60 years old, whatever. Like if you read the terms and conditions of any of those, including TikTok, like they're like they own and they can use your like resemblance
Right.
like
Yeah.
without any limitations. So we can start going, right? Like, so it's like avatars from like people's personal photos, right? So the first thing is data governance, right? Like I upload my picture. Am I the only one who can use it? And I think Hagen is a really great example of, oh, I didn't mean to thumbs up. Hagen is a really good example of how they manage it, because it's like, and I laugh because like it's not ironclad, but they make you record this video that feels like, those kind of like put today's paper here and kind of like ransom, kind of like the my name is, and you need to say a script that is randomized for everyone, and it's funny because like it's I laughed that we generated some. We were doing like a test for them for like it's just a gimmick, but we fooled their system with something generated with a more sophisticated like generation algorithm, because they just reverse engineer. The way they checked it is that they try to generate it with your thing, and that was their
Right.
benchmark.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw Westworld, but
No, I
you
didn't.
haven't. Okay, so damn it. Sorry, spoilers. Do you mind if I spoil it for you, Heather?
No, spoil it.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
So part of what they did was a human benchmark, kind of like when they were trying to clone people. And it
Mhm.
was they had this script, this conversation that they recorded with the actual human, and they were trying to recreate his mind. So it was like, how far and how quickly did you deviate from the script? And that's what Hagen was doing. They were trying to generate a video, and like if you were better, you were outperforming their generated model with like
Mhm.
your kind of like, oh, how often do I like do something, or like there's little quirks on how you speak, how you move.
Right.
So they just measured. That's what they measured. They were like, how
Oh,
likely is it that it was
wow.
generated by our thing? But we just ran it through something that was like way more sophisticated, not financially viable for everyone to do. But we were like, we fooled it. We fooled you guys because we were ahead of the curve. And that is the thing with safety, right? Like there will always be a bigger, better like actor who has more money. Right now,
Mhm.
it's we're a part where you can still throw money at the problem, and we're not dealing yet with like energy crisis and stuff to the point that it's like, oh, energy is prohibitively expensive. Like you can just keep throwing money at the problem, and that's what a lot of these companies are doing. So then you go to explainability, right? Like if I wanted to explain why did the video just suddenly do this, right? Can you point back to the avatars, right? Like from the photos, right? Can you explain why you did this, or why did it put here? Did it put in mold? Did like can you explain why it's doing certain things, where it's grabbing here, it's like, oh yeah, you fit into this archetype of like your voice type, and we're
Mhm.
grabbing these things from your cadence, from your
Mhm.
pronunciation,
Mhm.
from your
Mhm.
background. We had you speak these words, and maybe we might get some words wrong, but we can explain why we made you pronounce a word in like Japanese weirdly, right? Like I don't
Right.
speak Japanese, so like maybe something from like hiragana, katakana, like if it's anime related, maybe I'll pronounce it properly. Like kawaii or whatever, ooh, or something like I'll probably say it right, but if it's something that's really specific, I probably won't be able to speak it properly.
Right.
Then comes back to like fairness, right? Like, am I biasing towards something? Is it that like with my wife, we talk about it kind of like that I have been really privileged when I try to use Siri, Google, Alexa, whatever. Sorry if I triggered anyone's. I try to not do it. But it's the like I have the most basic Silicon Valley like tech bro English, so of course it's gonna understand me because it was trained on people who spoke the way I do, or
Right.
was a facial recognition thing done with something that was trained with people who look like me, right? And that's where you start looking into like, well, is it fair? Is it not fair? Did it struggle making avatars for people from certain like culture, race, or
Mhm.
something? Yes, no,
Mhm.
maybe. So I'd be scoring it. Then privacy, right? Like going back to like, is it anonymous, right? Are you checking that the person who you're making the avatar of signed off? That goes back to the Hagen part of like they make you record that thing, and that's kind of like their liability insurance for like the hey, you authorized us to do it, right?
Right.
And a big part of the fee you pay them yearly
Yeah.
is legal fees. Like it's
Oh,
an insurance policy for if you sue them for something and someone did something that
wow.
was a mistake. Because once you train it, it's not that they're improving it. Like they're already training, like they're improving their general algorithm. So it's not that they're like, that's why you have like a V1 avatar, like a V3 avatar, and you want to upgrade it. Yeah, you'll upgrade it, but they're just retraining it. They might ask you to re-record it, and I love that Hagen has that option that you can go to a professional recording studio, that they're gonna normalize lighting and a lot of other things. But it's back to like they're private, they're a privacy first company, not an ad, not sponsored, not working with Hagen. We just did a funny thing on them. It was a security conference. But the thing here is like can I know, like, is it strictly confidential? How safe is it? If someone steals, like, they're a honeypot right now. Like, I can steal hate and I have the deepfakes ready. Better than an involuntary agent. And I was talking about like the uncanny valley effect still that the Microsoft thing had over just a still image, because it doesn't know anything about the way that I move. So then you go back to like security and safety once again. Like, how do you know that this is not going to be used to apply for a loan, right?
Right. Yeah.
Over the phone or something for me, right? Hagen can just be like, hey, we have 1,000 people. Let's get loans in Lagos, Nigeria. And some random countries are not checking. And it's like, hi, I'm taking the loan over the phone. And like, oh, do you have the yeah, I have the whole document. What do you want? I have everything I need about them. Like, and then back to like transparency, which is the last one, right? It's are you sharing kind of like openly how you're training your models, right? Can I look into the data? And I think that's the biggest criticism right now to most large data models is no one has made, outside of open source. Open source is different. That's why I'm a big proponent of open source. But ask OpenAI to publish like what they're training Sora on. Please do. Please.
Yeah.
They haven't.
Yeah.
ChatGPT or just GPT in general. Like, ask them. They're not going to tell you because right now it's proprietary. And I think that that's where you come back to like the dead internet theory. I think is very, very, very true. And it's, if you look at Facebook, it's just like it's a mess right now because it's part of that idea of like, right now you have AI consuming Gen AI content that just feeds it and it just gets into these like really wild, there's some Facebook groups that like are just like riddled with these bots. And it's funny because it's like, it's a meme of like the Jesus anything. And it's kind of like oh, here's like chickpea Jesus. Like, oh, look, I saw like a bag of chickpeas. I opened it and it looked like Jesus' face.
Oh
and
my God. Because
it fell into that stereotype of like Christian, elderly in the US, whatever, like, I don't know, the Bible Belt kind of thing, super like specific. And it's funny because you can tell it's DALL-E generated images and it's just the comments are bots, obviously. And I think it's the same thing that like Elon Musk talked about it in Next, like how do you know that you're interacting with a real human? That's the joke I made of like, see, 10 fingers moving. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to whistle something? But it's that kind of thing, like how do you know, right? And I think we're going towards like a trust crisis. And I think that's a big part of, we go through these things. Every company should have kind of like these kind of like I would call it like, most companies should have like an ethics board, period. Right. And I think it's no different if you're using AI or if it's an AI company. Like, if you're going to be applying AI into like any process in your company, like I think you should go through these 6 things, right? They go deeper into it. Like if you want to assess like safety, right? Like it's kind of like that. And they go super hard into like, is it like truthful? Is it toxic? Can I like prompt it? Can I inject it into doing something that it's not supposed to do? So I do think that companies should have a principle of like, I'm going to build guardrails to make sure that like people are not able to generate things as easily. Like you can have like a mid-journey kind of like the user reporting is the main thing. Once again, using humans, like people, like we can have nice things kind of deal. Like, no, why are you doing this? Because people can do like, you can accidentally generate something you shouldn't. Right. And that should improve the model. I think it probably happened to you. Like, kind of like you exit immediately. Oh no, what is that? Yeah. And it's the prompt that you're like, no, what did you train it on? And Midjourney hasn't even published theirs, right? And I think that that's where you start going into this part of where does the line of like the company, the users, and it's the same thing of like the safe harbor kind of principle of the internet of like you shouldn't penalize the company for what the users are doing with it.
Right.
Because dropping packets. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna make a t-shirt that says like I just dropped a packet. But it's the main thing is like go through have a rigorous process on how you're checking the ethics within it. And if you're thinking of building something, once again, go through it. If you're using something, ask those questions, right? Like go to terms of service, go check like what are you doing with this photo? And And I think it's part of like what I would call like just like tech literacy for people. Because you are still responsible for your usage of technology, right? Like companies
Right.
should be doing their best, but that doesn't take away your responsibility from the way you're using things.
True.
Big thing, just security thing for people. Go away from like any kind of smart device and have a safe word or a safe concept that you talk about with your family. For example, if you want to try to at least protect yourself from like this scam of like sounding your voice, or if they can even FaceTime you with like a generated video. So it's just have something that you can mention or you can ask about, and that's gonna, the more random the better, I would say. But those are like, that's something that kind of like stranger danger kind of thing, but to the extreme kind of deal. Like
Right.
if I mention this, like, and you don't reply, it's like, I know it's not you. Once again, that's a good Westworld reference, but it comes back
Right.
to this concept of, and we're gonna have these, we're gonna have to change obviously the way we interact with one another. I know the joke of like see 10 fingers moving them, whatever, that might start working right now, but it's eventually gonna be like, this is I love the thing that we talk about. The versions you see right now are the worst versions of whatever tool you're talking about. It's just
Right.
gonna get better.
Right.
So you can't rely on the 10 fingers thing. Like they're working hard on fixing that because that's one of the things that's keeping companies from using it reliably.
Right. Got it.
I think we're out of time on this, but yeah.
Yes, we are. Okay, so I'd like to open this up for Q&A, but while we're doing that, just to recap. So if you have a safe word basically for your human likeness and your human voice with your family to protect yourself against scams, that's super important. And make sure that you go through and you read the terms that companies have around AI, especially as it's a new technology. And those companies that are not offering their terms of and conditions, be careful. All right. So I'm going to check here, see. So do we have any questions for Pedro? Checking here. Feel free to drop them in the chat. And you are absolutely welcome if you would like to turn on your camera and address Pedro directly. Hi, Bruce.
Faster than typing. So you mentioned that we're going to need to sort of all educate ourselves on this to be sort of a responsible user. And the other side of this is that lots of companies and lots of consultants are trying to sell, how can we train your employees on this? Is there any way to train people on this?
Yes. I'll give you the first three, my three golden rules for training. And that's a great question, by the way. The first one is let them play. I call it like a fuck around money kind of deal, but like just encourage them to experiment and try tools. I think that we are afraid of the things we don't understand. And I think it's my experience, for example, a lot of people who joke about like, oh, VR isn't going anywhere, it's gonna be this. It's because they're unfamiliar with the tech, right? Like your imagination is limited by what you're familiar with. So the first thing is like have a playground, have a money, and the main thing is there has to be an accountability, right? Like they can play around, just share with others, right? Like so that's the first one. The second one is you need to think about it as kind of like having like a shared brain in your company. So anything people find, like don't try to control it. The more decentralized, the better, because people are going to have their own little nightmares that keep them up, and they're going to try many, there's so many services for anything. I think the last count I had, it was like over 1,500 startups that were doing stuff with like generative AI, from LLMs to images to like accounting, auditing. And I think a big part of it comes down to there's not a one size fits all, right? So if you have like a curated thing of like how are you documenting it, right? Like this was my nightmare. My budget for this, I wanted to not spend more than $10 to solve it. This is how I tried to optimize, explain to it. This is what I tried. Did it work? Yeah, but I kind of still was doing most of the work. I think I took more time. Do you think, and do you see other people? And one of the best practices, which is the third one, is have people actively share it, right? So if you see someone else struggling with something that you've solved it, literally just put it up as a marketplace. And I think that that's one of the most creative uses of Payman that I've seen, is because Payman started as it started with humans in mind. That's a thing that I laugh about, because it was like, you're struggling with something, just put like a bounty, right? Like, hey, if someone can fix this for like 15 bucks, I couldn't find someone on Fiverr who could do it, and I don't want to bother with explaining to it. Like, just submit it here. That was the original idea behind payment, and now it's like those like automated things. But everything from like custom GPTs, like it's a marketplace, right? So people can just pre-train it. Is it explainable? No, but then I think that's gonna, you can train your own probably better than the ones that are out there, unless it's a very specific thing and the people behind it are very specialized in it. But the main principle is like decentralized, right? Work like a DAO. So like have people have the same advice I gave about like focus on what's keeping you up at night. And even if you don't find an AI solution for it, just being able to articulate the things that you're struggling with in your company, like you can still use humans to solve them, right? They might be like, oh, I didn't know that this was such a, like, oh, I do this. Kind of like that. Oh, I hate parking here because I can't see the thing. It's like, oh, we need better lighting, right? It's not a matter of like self-driving cars or anything. It's just like well, might need better lighting here, and oh no, I need to rush because if I don't like the stairs, the elevator doesn't work in this floor, right? Not all the solutions are come out of this. It's always going to be AI, but I think the main thing is always going to be that curiosity, that like childlike desire to just solve things and bring that joy into it, right? Like that's why I love like joy stealing and joy bringing is the like the archetype that you can think about it, right? So if it's a problem that everyone has, then you're going down the right path. And don't worry too much about like the return over the investment you're doing. I think that a lot of people struggle with that, but trust me, like if you're spending more than like something like HeyGen, obviously like I want to train my custom one, like I need $1,000 plus like a yearly commit, whatever. Make sure that you keep the budget in check and those kind of things. There probably are better solutions. They don't really need their own avatar of themselves doing it. They can use something like Synthesia or just like generic, like I'm gonna make tutorials for like how to do ABC. Just let them play around. I think that the playground approach is like kids are onto something.
Okay. I have a question here from Dr. I'm sorry if I'm butchering this, Dr. Thielsen. And she would like to know, what is your take on using synthetic data for training models when training data is inadequate?
Okay, I love it because that is my solution for most things is synthetic data. I think that the reason why most companies right now have struggled with like that explainability and they don't want to release their data sets is because they're like they probably are using data they shouldn't. And synthetic data, I think there's you should be aware of how much you're putting into it and make sure that you're not creating like a feedback loop, right? Like I don't know if it's a technical term, but you can basically box yourself in, right? Like so if you're I don't know how many chess nerds are gonna get this thing, but like if you always play the London opening, like, and that's all you feed into your bot, it's only gonna know how to do the London opening, right? So the idea is that your synthetic data, you need to be measuring risks. There are tools to check kind of like your bias. I think and make sure that you're keeping like you have your benchmarks, right? Like any model before you push it into production, like Midjourney does this really well. They do like they actually now do an opt-in. So you can be like, do you want to try the super beta, whatever? And they're deeply monitoring and they're like is this giving you the result it is and not, and they also take into like, are you upskilling it? And that's kind of like they know like, oh, you're liking what you saw. If you didn't upskill anything, it's like, damn it, we're not hitting it. Like there are ways of getting compliance, but I think that having a reliable process because it is like oftentimes for me like synthetic data is the best solution when there's things around like privacy concerns. Kind of like that I don't want to necessarily use like people's like financial behavior like specifically to do it. And I think that Apple kind of like frowns upon kind of like the identifiable data. We should have more of that, right? Like if users are coming here, what are the expectations of privacy? And if your concerns are going over, you're like hitting like alarms of like this is questionable on any of like your ethics and responsible AI, you're going to probably fall back into synthetic data. Just make sure you're still monitoring for like model collapse and like for bias within it, because if not, you're gonna reduce any usefulness you could have had. But yes, synthetic data is the way to go, and probably it's the main thing that's going to keep us from the internet death of humans not writing anymore, and kind of like the I think OpenAI has talked about it, kind of like it becomes like a self-referencing machine.
Thanks. All right, I've got a question here from Devron. What do you think the easiest segue into AI is for creatives? ChatGPT, Midjourney, SGRA, or even finding specific LLMs and platforms that are interest and hobby specific?
Can you repeat it? Because I missed a couple parts there.
Okay. What do you think is the easiest segue into AI for creatives? ChatGPT, Midjourney, SQRA, or even finding specific LLMs and platforms that are interest hobby specific?
Ooh, okay. I think it would depend on what your biggest nightmare is. And I would say that I would start with something that you're really motivated to fix on for yourself, because that's where you're going to be the best judge of the tool. So I think that it's kind of like I love it's a guitar reference, but kind of like what's the best guitar? The guitar that makes you want to pick it up and play with it. I think that a lot of people don't go over that, like in a Seth Godin way, kind of like that they don't go through that like that trial of like disillusionment where you're like, oh, I suck at it, and they never cross that threshold to like get to the point where they're enjoying it. So I think that there's a side of whatever's motivating you. I would say that for reliability, probably OpenAI is pretty consistent with their things. I think for $19.99 you get DALL-E, you get ChatGPT, and you get custom GPTs even to play around with. I would probably do the like give it 100, right? Give it 100 days and have like a goal and force yourself to use it every day. And you'll probably find it in like using it in weird ways, and you can probably start getting into the ethics thing, like are you gonna ask it to make like, I want it to make sushi, but I don't like fish, but I love chicken, and then have ChatGPT suggest you to make like raw chicken sashimi, and you're gonna be like, probably not, kind of deal. I love their disclaimer of like it might make mistakes, I don't know, whatever. But I would say that probably familiarity is your best friend. So I would probably not try to. Oh, go for it.
No, I just wanted to say, my go-to, site for that, I recommend people to the site. There's an AI for that. Yeah, there's all kinds of AIs there. And as an alternative to ChatGPT, there's Bing, because Bing is powered by ChatGPT 4, but it's free. And I think it's a little easier to navigate, especially the image generation. Like, I can't use DALL-E, and I'm tech savvy because it's annoying. But Bing, I find much easier. And now I tried today for the first time Meta AI. Oh my God, let me tell you guys, this is amazing. As you are typing in the words, it starts generating the image before you're even done. I mean, it's like unreal. Wow. This is, my mind is blown. But anyways, yeah.
I just want to make a comment on that, because I think that there's two things that are like that are a great example. This is a really good example of what I would call like the public brain in your company. Oftentimes, for example, I'm probably one of your worst references for what's out there that's working, because I tend to build stuff. And so I'm a really bad user of AI that I didn't make myself, and that's because in a way, like if I want to, I can build my own. Like my wife, I remember before Midjourney, I had my own image generation thing that took forever, and I could do like a 300 by 300 pixel was the most I could do, and my computer sounded like a freaking airplane. But I think that it's that culture of sharing, right? I've seen people mention like Perplexity. There's like no code, a lot of things. The reason why I mentioned OpenAI is because like it's there's tutorials for pretty much anything with OpenAI, and I think a lot of other startups probably they're better specialized things. But what I like about particularly like OpenAI stuff is you can say whatever you want about Sam Altman, but I do think that they're doing a good job of at least the safety around it. Like it's a safety first AI. Obviously don't put your passwords in there and that kind of stuff. Assume that people are going to prompt inject it, but I think it's a safe playground. I'm not telling people like code and probably use like APIs. But yeah, like if use whatever is at hand, right? Like whatever you like. I think it's the same thing that I told Bruce, like let people play around, right? take it, and what I was gonna say before, like Dr. Thiessen talked there, was have fun with it, right? Like, don't put kind of like my business depends on me being able to do this in a weekend kind of deal. Just stress free, right? Be like, I've always wanted to write a poem, right? Help me write a poem. How do I write a poem? And I think about it more as like a collaboration coach rather than it's gonna do it for me. I would say probably more the I love this about, like, when I lived in Korea, I loved seeing that, like, do it for me was the attitude for a lot of things. Versus in the, like, in Guatemala or even like in the US, it's more of like a DIY, like, let me do it myself kind of deal. Like, the more I can do it myself is better. So take it like that. Like, the best way that I use any LLM is I ask it questions and I ask it to help guide me to an answer, right? I don't expect it to give me the right answer. I want it to help me guide it because I'm using it as a second brain, right? I'm helping it coach me to, like, hey, like, and you can have like super specialized GPTs, but even just a simple like chat GPT can be like before you reply to an angry email, like something made you upset. You don't want to, like, as an introvert, it's been one of the best things. Sometimes I just go through it, and through the act of typing and interacting with it, I go like is it really worth getting this upset about? Like, am I the baddie here kind of deal? And I've caught myself sometimes like that. Wait, it's not unreasonable. Like, I would be upset if someone did that to me. Fine. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Right. So yeah, run it through, like, is this passive aggressive? Ask it to ChatGPT and send it there. Like, if you wouldn't even send it to ChatGPT because it's going to be associated to you for training data, then don't send it. Bring joy.
Bring joy. Okay, I'm going to keep moving through these questions. We've got about 9 minutes left. I have Rupert asking, any take on digital provenance and tagged AI metadata? Will people even care in an era of mass polarization when each conflict inspires a wave of propaganda on social media? We love righteous indignation, and it's been weaponized against us.
I think it goes back to responsible and safe AI. I know people mentioned like meta AI, and I think that I have like people are not gonna like it, but I have a wokeness test for whenever anyone's dealing with something, and I think both Google sucks at it, Facebook sucks at it, any big company sucks at it. You know who doesn't suck at it? Open source. Because a badger don't give up. And I think that that's a big thing, right? I think that when it comes down to like polarizing and stuff, it's get out of your echo chambers. I think that touching grass, as funny as it sounds, like interacting with people, I think that was one of my nicest things. And then design was, I'm used to interacting with like academics, people kind of like feeling like we're all talking about it. It's either optimism or like super fatalist. But I think that probably one of the best things for humanity has been that like the creative space was affected as early as it did. Because I think that creatives are like, for me, like the healers, the empaths of humanity, right? Because you are more, you're a lot more sensitive to kind of like how your work is affecting others than if I were to take it as like a strict financial data. Everything's a number. You can optimize it. You can automate it. So I think that, I don't know if that answers the question. It's kind of like just make sure that you know what you're using. Make sure that you know their bias. It goes back to the same things, like, is it fair? Is it explainable? Is it private? Is it safe? Right? Are they transparent about how they use it? Because I think that most polarization really it's predatory on ignorance. Like you can't radicalize someone if they're in their full use of reason. Right? Like if they're aware, if they're not afraid, like, and any kind of propaganda is going to go back to like, and if you look at like just kind of like for where propaganda comes, like they're just going to take something you're afraid of and they're going to make you more afraid and more aware of it, right? Like news were built as like Peter Diamandis, and I love that I grabbed it from him. He calls it the Crisis News Network, CNN. Like it's designed to generate views, clicks, right? It's trying to get a reaction out of you. I know we were teasing it before we started, and we were like, we tease you because we get a reaction out of you, right? Same thing with these systems, right? Like if they get a reaction out of you and you're not questioning it, then just, yeah, I think being in touch with nature, like face to face, for now, that we don't know if it's a simulation, but at least like I know that I don't need to check like, is this really you? Is this a video that you sent? Because I've seen people use it for good or for bad, any tool, and I think that the more aware you are, the more in touch you are with what cannot be done, is probably your best defense.
Okay, last question for you. We got to make this quick. We have 5 minutes. If you were a college student today, what advice would you give what advice would you give college students today who are just coming into the workforce, coming into their career, with all the rapid change? How can they adapt and train for the future?
That's learning 3 things, right?
Okay.
And goes in this order, right? First, learn how to listen, right? Not with the intent to answer, but rather to understand. The second one is learn how to write. And because in that process, you're going to learn how to think. And I think that your ability to articulate thoughts and to have a thought of your own and be able to have a conversation with someone is going to make you someone who can interact with others better, right? You're going to have your own opinion. And I think that that's what's going to become even more and more important. And being able to listen with the purpose of being able to understand others is going to build that empathy that is something that for me right now, it's still very uniquely human. And I think that that's going to be most, if not all of the human work that's going to be out there is going to be empathy related. As I talked about, kind of like if you're creative, right? Like that ability to make someone feel like if I watch an ad and it makes me like, why I don't even like football, but I love watching the Super Bowl for the ads, right? Because it shows you what people, you give them like fuck around money to make an ad, what they come up with, and some are hit or miss, and I think that's part of humanity. Like not everything's gonna do it, and I think that the last advice is don't take it too seriously, right? I think that our perception of how we build value, how we measure value, I think that right now we're coming out of a system that's more scarcity based, right? So it was kind of like my time is scarce, this is scarce, towards like more of an abundance mindset where like I think energy is probably the biggest example of it. Like if energy and power they didn't cost anything, like how do we use the internet, right? Like just look at how you use your internet consumption on your phone, on your mobile data plan versus at home where it's not metered at all. Like the more abundant you feel like a resource is, the better it is. So I think that you can waste a little, right? You can have a little bit of fun with it. So don't worry too much about like, oh, should I not study A, Y, or B because it's going to be disrupted by AI? Newsflash, it's going to come at you faster than you think, and it's going to, like, when shit hits the fan, like, what you're going to be left with is the way you think and you navigate with the world. And I think that your ability to interact with humans and understand their needs, what keeps them up at night, and how to solve it is probably the best way to be of value to others, right? Like, more than being self-serving, think about how you can be of service to others, and people, if you're doing it and you're bringing them joy, like they're going to be happy. Then whatever kind of economic like post-scarcity world we have, like no matter what economic model, like we will always find ways of cherishing and valuing and showing that value to people that are bringing good to others.
Love that. Pedro, thank you so much for giving us your time and expertise. It is so wonderful to see you and speak with you again. And thank you everybody for joining us today. This call has been recorded. We'll have this uploaded to YouTube and Spotify shortly. If anybody who missed this call wanted to be on it, it'll be available to you. Thank you so much and have a wonderful Friday.